Want to do a cheers? We'll start off. Like to do it.
Salute.
Yeah. So, welcome to the Rightest Leftist with Nathan Ogilvie. I am Nathan Ogilvie, and today we have my friend Joe.
My name's Joe Green.
Joe, do you want to start off maybe with your job title and just a little bit about your political alliance? Would you say you're a centrist? Is that what we're calling you?
I think so, yeah. My name, Joe Green, as mentioned, I'm 35. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I work as a merchandiser, which is a little bit like a buyer, a fashion buyer, I suppose. Education level, I did a bachelor's in business. I graduated at the end of 2010, and I finished an MBA about a year ago. I would say that politically I sit in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, will you tell us who you voted for, or do you want to keep that a mystery?
Oh, I'd like to see the comments. See who.
Like mystery,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can reveal that in the next episode.
Yeah. That's the new game we'll play. Just leave a comment. Who do you think Joe voted for?
You might be surprised.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, this is where I don't like the term centrist, because I think of it as like an Obama, where it's sort of you take the left and the right and you sort of try and average it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's how you define it, but do you have particular one or two issues that usually make you decide your vote?
I think I've moved. Yes, but they're not quite so clear cut.
Yeah.
So I don't vote based on single policies.
Okay.
When I was 18 and I started to vote, always voted Labor.
Okay.
That was more kind of how my family had voted, and naturally I was just that way more inclined. Well, my mum voted that way because it was more beneficial towards her industry. She worked in welfare services, so things like funding heavily dependent on government support, particularly federal and state too. So my dad, on the other hand, was probably a little more conservative. So I would hear arguments for both, but innately I probably lean more towards the left.
Okay.
And as I've got older, I probably moved more towards the middle, not because I wanted to, but because my interests weren't really being catered to, I suppose. Yeah. First and foremost, I graduated into the aftermath of the GFC. So, of course, that hit in 2008. The markets went crazy, and I graduated into a pretty barren job market.
Yeah. And did that inform at the time, it was more the economic situation you're in, made you think about the different political parties or the environment that we're in, and that sort of influenced?
I think so, yeah. So I'd always champion individual responsibility. I've always done what I can to take responsibility for myself, whether that is just looking for work. I'd always had private health insurance, that kind of thing. Yeah. Not because I wanted to, but more so because I recognised the benefits attached to having that. I guess as I got older, and you have your first job when you graduate from uni, and then you think, all right, well, I think I'm ready for the next one. I noticed that the job market was stronger, and it probably hit home for me when I was about 21. I remember I was applying for jobs, finished uni, and I just was not hearing anything back. And it's pretty easy to point a finger in those circumstances, but I wasn't alone. My friendship groups from high school were in pretty similar positions. Those who hadn't studied something that was pretty dope, like medicine, for example, engineer, where the route is a little more predictable. Yes. It's more linear, I suppose. So if you study medicine, you graduate, you become a doctor, you choose what you want to specialise in. I studied business, so it was a little more vague and undefined. I probably add more, in terms of an education, transferable skill set, which wasn't the great. It was flexible, but wasn't really applicable to anything in particular at the same time. Yeah. But I applied for maybe 10 jobs a week, and when you're applying for that many jobs and you're at home, you get pretty good at it. Like you,
It becomes its own skill.
You do. You have the time to tailor your CV, to write a cover letter. And I went to a nice school, and I went straight to uni. I graduated, and I was reasonably well travelled. And my dad is from the generation where there's a contract between the individual and the country. So it's if you do X, Y, Z, this is the opportunity that you will get, for the most part. So for him, it wasn't making sense. So he would say, well, what are you putting in the CV? Well, this doesn't make sense. You went to a nice school. And I did go to a nice school. I went to Peninsula Grammar in Mount Eliza, which, if you have a look at the fees, it's expensive. It is a good school. And I went to a good uni. And I was not getting replies. So for him, it didn't make sense. But for me, I was like, I didn't know any different. For me, this was just another example of what it was like to be Generation Y in Australia. So he decided to take it upon himself to take my CV, my cover letter template, and he had a go at applying for another 10 jobs. And he didn't hear anything back. In fact, he had less success than I had. So that conversation went away. Like, that went quiet pretty quickly. But I was still left. I was still, I was abandoned. He just wanted the conversation to go away, which understandably. But I think that he's not unique in that sense. I remember feeling frustrated at the time, but not really knowing why. And when I do see that for generations gone, I'm not necessarily saying that 1 + 1 = 2 every time, but it's probably closer to 2 than what I think it is for our generation. So I started to pay a little more attention to politics and who I was voting for around the age of 30. I wasn't quite so blind. It doesn't mean that the party that I've voted for has changed that much, but I have been paying more attention. And it is challenging to sort of differentiate the idealist in me and, when am I going to get my turn, sort of thing. So at 32, I decided to do an MBA because I was recognising that the job market was becoming increasingly competitive, and I wanted to give myself the best chance for upward mobility. And it's like we do see education as being the vehicle to achieve that. It hasn't been my experience, and I know a lot of people who have sort of adhered to the unspoken contract between individual and country, where you invest in your education and you work hard.
That's what I was told too.
Yeah, and you'll be afforded opportunity. I haven't really experienced that, but what I have experienced is a housing market where the average house price is 10 times the median salary, and kind of the cost of goods is just absolutely exploded. So if you go to a supermarket, a basket of goods is considerably more expensive than what it was.
Yeah,
but wages haven't really grown. And we're going to talk about.
Put the chart up.
Look
at how it's stagnant.
Yes.
They're going up slightly, but
that's
not
it.
much. Yeah,
that's it. And it is frustrating. And I think that, say, like, to use myself as an example, I've had quite a few interviews in the last 18 months. My experiences with employers has not been great. It's like the job will either go to an internal that they can pay less. Understandably, it's a business. Or they will just decide to not fill the role. I haven't been told, we just went with somebody else because they were better, but I have been told that I've been overqualified. And I think that, like, when you get to an age, if you performed in an interview or not. And I can give an example recently where a recruiter reached out and I had a first conversation with a company mid last year. Really like your experience, education profile, all that good stuff. Want to have a chat, might be able to make something for you. I could have done great stuff for this business. And after a coffee chat with the hiring manager, yep, this is the next step. Okay, great. Went totally quiet. Did not hear anything. And that is not a unique experience. And over time, out of nowhere, I heard back from them. Yep, want you to meet with the HR manager. Great. I turn up. They don't turn up. I get like an apology email saying, "Hey, look, really sorry. This has happened. Don't want this person to be able to identify if they ever listen to this, but could not make the meeting, so I've taken the morning off. I'm in a cafe, and the interview's been cancelled." So I'm frustrated, but keep in touch with the hiring manager and have another catch up with somebody else, same business, early this year, and then I got a message in the last week saying, "Oh, yeah, there's nothing here." So it's that experience is not unique. Now, let's say that had worked out. We were aligned on salary, this, that, the other. My focus wouldn't be so much on my frustrations with the state of Australia because, well, my salary's gone up. I'm in a job where I'm happier. I have a sense of progression, and I'm in a different economic weight class, so kind of the surrounding pressures, things like increasing expenses in Australia, don't impact me to the same degree. I can say, well, I worked hard and I did what I needed to do, and I was afforded a favourable outcome. But when you have repeated examples of frustrating interviews, this, that, the other, companies deciding to go in a different direction, which is totally their prerogative. I'm not owed a job. But it does violate an unspoken contract between citizen and country, I think. Now, what is the government's responsibility in that? What is the employer's responsibility? But I think that it leaves people, particularly my age and my generation, feeling marginalised and disenfranchised.
Yeah. Do you think that's what leads a lot of people to just check out and not vote?
Yes.
Or not pay attention? Because it's like, well, I followed the linear rules and look where it's got me.
Nathan, if I have a look, I've upheld my end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Where has it got me? Look, I live in a nice home. I haven't changed my car, like in God knows how long. And, you know, then the dream of owning a home, which, you know, I'm sure we'll come to that, where home ownership has become investment, not a right.
Yeah.
It's become an increasing dream, that shelter has become something to aspire to, not a right.
So, like, to bring this to politics, to how politics relates to your personal situation, I want to take I'll try and give the credit to the right wing and any liberal voter listening that would go, because I imagine the argument would go something like this. This is why we cut taxes and cut public services, because that will free, then, like, you know, corporations, businesses, if they don't have to pay as much tax, they could then invest that money in people like yourself and have bigger budgets. And I feel like there's probably more to it than that, but I think that would be a right winger listening to what you've just explained then. They're probably saying this is why we need to cut all that stuff.
On paper, I don't disagree. Yeah. But the reality is that I haven't experienced the benefit directly of trickle-down economics, where decreased tax on big business has led to a favourable outcome for employees. I haven't experienced that.
Are you telling me businesses don't use that extra money? I can't believe it, Joe.
If they do, it's not. And I don't want to badmouth my employer, but it's not my employer. Like, I mean, I don't mind saying that my salary has not increased in proportion to the value that I bring.
Yeah, like inflation and cost of living and all that. If that's at 5% or whatever, it's gone down a little bit, but over the last couple of years, if your wages haven't gone up like that, you've lost money. In the last few years, I've lost money. But I'm not unique. I think you're talking about what a lot of people are feeling. But this is often the argument from, like, let's say that I had this conversation with my dad. He'll say, well, you don't have to stay there. It's like, and that's a great point. Yeah. I've applied for, and you know, and then this goes to the job application conversation that we just had, where, you know, it's okay, I'll do what I need to do. Yeah, it doesn't. 1 + 1 isn't equaling 2. Okay, I'll work on my education. I'll do this, and you know, I think that gone are the days where just work harder. It's like, all right. I can't work any harder than I already do. So this is where I feel like it can get really tangled up, because that sort of gave the right wing argument then about just go somewhere else, or this is like the Labor government's fault because businesses don't have the money to invest because of high taxes. So so you're saying you're a centrist, you were more left wing or a Labor voter early on, and you've moved more. if that right-wing argument isn't compelling, what's moved you to the position of calling yourself a centrist? Like, what's the compelling part of that side of the argument that if you're experiencing this sort of blockage to have a successful career?
I still like the idea of individual responsibility. I still like that, and I probably double down on that.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think in that sense, that's probably what led me more to. Like I did when I was younger, I thought, okay, but I'm ticking all the boxes. Like I went to a nice school, I did my degree, but that doesn't end my obligation. I think that I still have an obligation to continue to, and I think that it comes out of hope that there will be a time when, like I said, I do change jobs, and I do have a considerable increase in income. So I guess it's not that I'm sitting on the fence, it's more that I recognise the validity of both arguments. And I think that has come with maturity, education, understanding, and lived experience. So I'm not looking at things purely through a lens of ideation. It's more balanced through real experience as well.
Yeah, and in that way, I think it's that this is where, maybe I'll talk about it in the negative first. I think this is where governments like a Trump can exploit that, like people like yourself who they feel and see the job market drying up, and then if someone like a Trump comes along, or in Australia Pauline Hanson, like you go even further right past the Liberal Party, National Party, to the One Nation, say it's the immigrants' fault, they're coming in and taking your jobs. That can be easily exploited for people. That might be part of the reason for some industries, but I can see like it's almost that's the right wing pipeline. People can get pulled into that, finding someone to blame for it when. The business, I mean, we can talk about the business in a minute.
That absolutely capitalises on a lack of understanding. I don't necessarily want to say education, because there's plenty of educated people that don't critically think.
Yeah, if you have that line of thought, you can go down that.
Migrants have taken all of our jobs. No, they're not. They're not. And the impact that migration does have on the stagnation of wages is minimal. It's the policies that are the issue. Because those migrants come to Australia, they're not taking kind of the glamorous jobs. They're working those, unfortunately, they're working in low-income jobs that Australians don't want. So I think that tends to be a huge misconception and more of a distraction than anything. If we have a look at things like housing, even with the amount of migration that we have, housing shouldn't be as expensive as what it is. And that's a longer conversation that we can have another time about why I think that is. And I'd like to back that up with some data, because I don't just want to point the finger. But
I think it's all related though, isn't it? That a lot of
supply and demand. We haven't increased our supply, and we've kept Australia's GDP artificially inflated by constricting housing supply, and we've turned it into a luxury, not a right. So I do find that the government does exploit housing costs, the cost of housing, to keep its GDP artificially inflated, and it does through that open the floodgates of immigration. But I am a migrant. I wasn't born in Australia. My partner wasn't born in Australia. There's a lot of good that can come from it. The only Australian-born person in my household is my 4-week-old daughter. So I see, I understand why Australians are frustrated, but it's not the migrants that are the issue.
Yeah, and so with the business, how does that relate? If we take it back to sort of the government, like what can the government? Because I don't think I've done an episode on this yet, but I'm interested in even whether it's implementable or not. An idea like an employment requirement where you attach that to, if a business makes a certain amount of revenue, like so for every $1 million, they have to have an X amount of employees. Because like a company like this is America, but Instagram has this was old numbers. I'd have to check the modern numbers, but it was something like 20 to 25 employees, because it's a small part of the bigger Facebook company. But it brings in like billions of dollars, and maybe like some kind of that I can already hear the right wingers like rolling their eyes, like that's government intervention. Yeah. But I guess it's just that let's say the owner of the business that didn't end up hiring you, or that the job market where there's not many jobs. I guess, the CEOs would say like, we only have so much money in the budget, or if there's something like AI and it can do parts of the job, of course, like as a business, they're there to make money. Of course, they might cut 500 tech jobs if they can get a computer to do it for half the price or whatever. As I said, it is business. So What are your thoughts on that? Like what would businesses say to all this? Like,
I don't think that there's one simple answer. I don't think there's a magic bullet. And we are in times that are unprecedented. Like, let's have a look at the intensity of competition for a role now is significantly higher than what it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. You're no longer competing against the best person in your town for a job. You're competing against the best person in your city, in your country, possibly in the region as well. Like, for example, if I interview with a company, there's a big sports brand that I interviewed with, and I met all the criteria, had the interview. The hiring manager said, look, I've got no doubt. It was very complimentary, said very, very nice things. But I wasn't just up against the best people in Melbourne for that job. I was up against some of the best people in the world for that role, because it was at a level of income, a level of seniority within the business, where it makes sense for them to cast their net a little bit wider to find the person that may be most appropriate. Additionally, they will advertise that role within their company globally. So I believe that role went to somebody from another country that was already within the business. And it's like it is becoming increasingly harder to prove why. You used to have to prove why somebody from overseas has the skill set that you can't find locally. I think it's becoming the other way around. It's oh, well, we don't have the skill set locally, so we have to look internationally, and that's not necessarily the case. But there are cost efficiencies for a business attached to bringing somebody into the country to do a role instead of putting an Australian first.
Yeah, I like that around, like, any kind of government policy that punishes. I find, people's natural reaction is to like push against it. Like, just look at the whole COVID thing. Vaccines and lockdowns and all of that, like, it builds a lot of resentment. And like my interview with Jake about, he was focused on the fighting people for not voting, things like that.
Yeah,
I look at it. I much prefer government to have incentives to encourage. It's like positive reinforcement. You reward the behaviour you want to see, and you're likely to see it again.
Yeah.
So is that what you like? If we get to the question of like, what can the government do about this? Because businesses are, the government and business.
Yeah.
Not the same thing, but the government can, I like that Nordic model, the Scandinavian countries where you let capitalism run, but if it starts going off the walls, that's when the government steps in to keep it on track, to keep the competition. So in that framing, do you have any ideas or are there other examples in other countries that do it well of like how a government can incentivize more local hires than international? If you're sort of saying a big company may go global for this one role, so you as an Australian who have done everything you need to do would be perfectly qualified and well in the job, but they're going to go to like the USA or UK to get someone.
Yeah.
What can government do about that?
I think that the lazy answer would be to incentivize, but what that would look like, I don't know, because I don't have the answer. I think that it's difficult to have a blanket rule because we deal with public and private companies. So I work with a private company. What the owners of the business do within the confines of the law is their business. It's up to them. And I think that as soon as the government starts getting involved, I think we can get very, very messy, and I don't think that there's a kind of a blanket rule or caveat that can kind of address this issue. It is, and it's not one-dimensional too. So let's say that I was paid a salary in my role that was in line with the value that it's not just what I think I know that I bring. Housing would become increasingly affordable, but the government can't kind of tell people what they need to pay because a lot of businesses can't actually afford to pay. Like if we have a look at little cafes, for example, they wouldn't be able to run if they had to pay their staff superannuation, penalty rates, and everything was on the books. The government knows that that's happening. And we have a lot of international students that come that do bring a lot of money because they pay for their visas to keep a lot of those degree factories open. But they know that when they come into the country they don't really have the requisite funds to survive because even the locals don't really have that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an don't ask, don't tell. So I think that if there was some kind of blanket law is you have to hire Australia first, I think that would probably create as many problems as it solves.
Yeah. See, I think that sounds, when I say incentive, I would talk about, let's just say, like, just make up a policy right now, like hire Australia. You know, like I think Albany's talking about future made in Australia or something.
Yeah.
Imagine if they had a pair policy that like hired in Australia, and it was like, let's say the market rate for that kind of role is 150,000.
Yeah.
The government could say we'll subsidise 10%, so 15. But only if they hire an Aussie in that role.
Yeah.
So that's to me, when I say incentive, like I probably didn't define it properly. To me, that's more of an incentive than you have to hire at that rate. Like what you're saying around like the government telling the businesses what they have to do. I don't see that as a positive. That's not my definition of incentive. That's more of a rule. And I do think there is that natural anti-authoritarian. There's people are going to argue against, like try and push back. If it becomes a law, they're obviously going to have to do it. But when I say incentive, I mean like make it more financially appealing to hire Australians.
It's become increasingly challenging to run a business in Australia because the cost of living.
I know.
It doesn't just hit the citizens.
Yeah.
The cost of doing business also impacts businesses as well. So I work in the retail industry. A lot of retailers are closing their doors, so they're increasingly moving towards digital platforms and less so physical retail, which is a real shame because there's there's a perception that Generation Z want to only do things online.
We call those the Zoomers now.
The Zoomers.
Yeah.
Zoomers don't only want to shop online; they want to have the experience because they don't really have anything visual authentically theirs. So, in the fashion industry, trends come around as the younger generations discover it, and they go, "Oh, this is actually pretty cool." Like digital cameras have become quite a hot item at the moment because there is some kind of kitsch value to it for them. I wouldn't have foreseen that. I was like between 12 and say 20 years old when digital cameras there was one in most households.
Yeah.
I don't care because I believe that. They haven't. So I think that there is still demand for things like physical retail, but businesses can't afford to run it. Like businesses are losing money because things like leases have become so expensive. The rent for a shop front, Nathan, it's like gone up like 30% in the last 2 years.
And I will add there too, like whose fault is that? It's probably a lot of these places now are owned by multinational companies. I'm doing a series, this will sort of come out amongst that series on that, where those private equity and firms are just trying to squeeze every dollar. So this is where it's about too, where I'm like, the government could be attacking that too, about setting limits. Because this happens in the rental market. We don't want to jump around too much, but like I personally talk about my experience of a 25% rent increase in 1 year. And what they do is they base that on the market around. But if everyone's doing it, they just operate like a cartel. And I'm sure the commercial real estate works the same, because I know that too. I'm moving office soon because I got a ridiculous price hike. And that's a capitalist thing. It's like, go somewhere else. Well, it's like, okay, I'll try. But sometimes if you're saying with retail, if they're all doing it, businesses get stuck, don't they?
Like I had, it wasn't a cost of living increase on my salary last year. It was not in line with inflation, but my rent went up 25%, and then it's going to go up.
Can you agree? I'm trying to see if people agree with me on this or not. That's immoral. I don't even mean financially. That's just immoral, isn't it?
It's wrong.
Increase rent 25%.
Yes, it's wrong.
Nothing else. Maybe a few like items. I don't know, consumer items. Maybe some of those things have jumped 25% in a year. But for anything to jump, if wages jump 25% in a year, businesses would be going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If inflation jumped 25% in a year, the society would probably be collapsing. But somehow we can accept that. This is the part that I get, where I'm much on the left of that. It's like, that's just ridiculous to increase rent that much. That's just landlords taking the piss.
It is. It's not okay. I can't disagree with that.
But back to the commercial. So is this what's happening? Is that why a lot of retail's closing because of these increases?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a few. Like there's one in my industry. There's one big business that they moved the needle.
Mm-hmm.
So once upon a time, this company might have been responsible for, and I'm just going to give vague examples and actual numbers because I don't want to get into that. But let's say it was 50-50 between this company and everybody else. It's now more like 80-20.
So it's we call it, it's like market concentration of like one or two businesses. Well, this in case one business.
And because their business has increased leverage now, they're able to ask for a discount. So 80% of... There's countless examples. Like Nathan, I used to work in store.
Yeah.
And the company that I work for is also a wholesaler.
Yeah.
So if they would come into my store, they go, "You're more expensive than these guys next door for the same product." And say, "Well, you just lost yourself a customer. All right, go next door."
Yeah.
It's just the money ends up in my pocket anyway.
Yeah. I'll repeat that just in case that I think I got cut off in that middle of that. So you're talking about the business. So we don't have to name them, but they own about 80% of that market as a buyer. Like that's called a monopsony or something, isn't it? Where they're the 80% of the seller, but the general public might not know because they might look like it's like sub businesses, and that's what people might know it as. So they think they're taking their business elsewhere, but it's actually owned by...
Well, very much. If we have, like, Australia has the most concentrated supermarket industry in the world, more so than the UK, because we have the duopoly. We've got Coles and we've got Woolworths, and they're just watching each other. Then outside of that, we've got Metcash, which is like IGA.
And Aldi.
And Aldi. Yeah, Aldi are doing some... They're I believe that they're starting to take some significant market share.
Yeah.
But they don't have the same footprint that Coles and Woolworths do.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a bit of time. I mean, if you go to Coles or Woolworths, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Because the reality is that as a duopoly, and if you go into things like game theory, they're just watching each other.
Yeah. And they're not allowed to do... This is where, with the competition... I've been looking a lot into how much the government's allowed to regulate in Australia, and the government can't set prices. So I actually thought they could, but
that's true.
That happens in the US. The president can step in, like I think Nixon did in the 70s or so. But in Australia, the government can't directly intervene in price fixing.
That's absolutely true. So we have an issue where we might sell some product to a wholesale, and we have our own...
Your business, so your business.
My business. Yeah. We might sell to a wholesale business, and we have this problem quite regularly. We might also put the same product in our own DTC channel, direct to consumer, so our own mono-branded retail doors.
Yeah. So people following can understand.
Yep.
Your business owns those stores as well.
We own those stores.
So it's like so you've got wholesale, but also you're selling directly to stores as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a wholesale partner.
Yeah.
But the product has come from us, whether it's in our direct channel or it's in through a wholesale partner.
Yeah.
It goes to the market, but it's come from us. It can go to market any which way. The product started with us. So the RRP is just a recommended retail price.
Yeah. The R recommended. Yeah.
You're supposed to set the retail price, like it's supposed to be in store at full price, and then you can discount it. It's just recommendation. We don't have to do this. So consumer law is very vague, and it's a little bit messy, and because it's become increasingly competition has become increasingly intense. Bigger businesses that can make more money, that they can just, we'll just make less margin. But at the same time, if they've negotiated a better wholesale price from us, there's fat in the margin, are you with me? So they can go to market at a cheaper price and cut out, say, the mom and pop stores that want to make the margin because they've had to pay more for the product from us.
Yeah.
And it's a mess. Like the amount of smaller retail businesses that I've seen go out of business in the last 18 months, 2 years, I've never seen it like this before.
Yeah.
Things are pretty bad. It's becoming a winner takes all.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is what I'm calling it, is like capitalism is spiraling out of control. Like this is not the way everything you're describing then happens in it happens in the supermarkets, like with Amazon online. Yeah. Big businesses squeezing out smaller businesses. Yeah. So the mom and pop stores are all going out of business.
Exactly.
That's not what I think capitalism is supposed to be.
No, it's not. It's not.
A way it's supposed to be defined is free market and competition.
Absolutely.
Not a huge company that owns most of the market.
Yeah.
Crushing the small business. Can I just ask them now, just with I know you're not going to say who you voted for. I'm guessing you didn't vote for the Liberal Party. Maybe. For the Liberal Party, well, I think some people say, and this is where my brother didn't want to say who he voted for, but says he's a right winger. Yeah. They'll say that the Liberal Party supports business, small and big. I don't know how you can sort of do both, because in the way you're describing, big businesses are crushing small businesses.
Yeah, they are.
I'm a small business. I'm very lucky. My industry isn't as concentrated in the psychology field.
Yeah.
I can operate amongst other big ones,
yeah.
But I can see how, and also there's ethics and things too, there's a lot of regulation just from our ethics and psychology. So I'm able to compete with the bigger psychology businesses.
Yeah.
But if I was a retailer, I don't know how I could vote for the Liberal Party if they're basically allowing a lot of these policies to go through.
Yeah.
They seem to not be doing anything. I don't think I've ever heard of a Liberal politician. They say they support. This is where I say like what they say and what they actually do.
Yeah.
I don't know any policies aside from just the vague lower taxes.
Well, this is
so how do we get out of this?
Yeah. Like, this is just my experience.
Yeah.
People who tend to vote for the right want less government intervention,
Right.
which means that there's less policing.
Yeah,
Which then means
that
means that those companies, it's like it's just an open slather. And if you've got the resources and you've got the capital, then you're at a significant advantage. I'm a capitalist, but I think that we've all got to have guardrails at the same time. And I think that Australia has not had those to the degree that it's been necessary. If we have a look in the US, and I don't have any data to back this up, but my understanding is that is that the middle class is shrinking.
Yeah.
And,
that's for sure.
The working class is growing, and a lot of that money that would have been perhaps spread amongst the middle class is now increasingly concentrated towards a very, very small percent. How many billionaires did we have over COVID? People become billionaires over COVID.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but it was a lot.
Yeah, like you look at like a Gina Reinhardt or like Elon Musk, their net worth shot up during COVID.
Yeah.
And so many people were struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's got to be a little bit more corporate responsibility as well. And to go back to your question earlier about how do we get, what can the government do? The answer is not necessarily like a profit share or something like that, because I think that's very difficult to police.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people, say, in my industry that own businesses, not necessarily talking about my employer, but they might have a really good year and they'll make a significant amount of profit. That company isn't reinvested back into the business because that's the owner's money. So they put it into their own investments.
That is why they do, isn't it? It's for profit.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
But my salary hasn't increased.
Yes.
Which, is frustrating for me. What would I do differently? At the end of the day, I don't have all the data and information, so I don't know where the money goes, where the profit goes, how it's split. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And if I asked, I'd never be told. But private companies don't have to disclose that. I think that more transparency would help. I think that people do respond to shame, but I don't think that shame should be used to police.
Yeah.
I think that, if the government went to an employer and said, how much more you made this amount last year, X amount, what is your wage bill now? Has it grown? But then it's easy for a company to say, oh yeah, we had a good year, but we're forecasting a decrease in the next year, this, that, the other. So it's very difficult to police, and as I said earlier, there's no magic bullet.
Yeah, I get that, and I agree with that too. I do think capitalism, it part of when it's spiraling out of control, but also some of it is a solution that people can vote with their dollars. And if, like with Harvey Norman, I could do a whole video on how corrupt it is. Jerry Harvey, but like how they were just ripping off people with the what was the it was PPP in America, but like the COVID, the job keeper.
Oh,
they were just taking all the stimulus and not passing it on.
Yeah.
So that's where like people, and I think a lot of that one sort of cuts through into the general public, and a lot of people stop shopping there.
Yeah.
Not en masse because it's still a business, but that's where I think people can vote with their feet.
Yeah.
But I guess like with the government, as you're saying, it's like multi-pronged. There's not like one, you do this policy and everything will happen.
Yeah.
But there's more that can be done than the government's currently doing. So in terms of, again, don't have to say who you voted for, but like what would a politician have to say, or did you notice this time around anyone in this area? Because this is McNamara, isn't it? So Josh Burns, the Labor MP, got in back in this quite handily, won this time. But was there anyone in your area, or like just anyone in general that you could point to that has a right idea about what the government could do?
No.
Okay.
No. Like to be honest with you, Nathan, if I voted for Liberal, I voted Labor, or I voted Greens, or I voted for another independent.
Yeah.
Like the outcome, my outcome would be no different. Like and it's like everybody says, "Oh, I'm just one vote," but if people collectively band together, I don't think that it's a surprise that Labor did win. I think that there's a lot of people our age and younger, particularly those that have become of voting age, have seen what has happened to our generation. I'm 35. How old are you? 32?
I don't know. Yeah, 32 now. 32.
Somewhere between 25
Once you're over 30, it just doesn't.
I think that they see our generation
Yes.
and they go, well, if they're fucked,
Yeah.
like what hope is there for me? And I think that they have this understanding, oh, the left is for the people, I'm a person, I'm going to vote for them. And it's kind of the right is just big businesses, then they kind of, I think there's a little bit of identity politics that comes into this as well, particularly when their understanding of the political system in Australia is not nuanced. I think that they do kind of revert to personas, and they go, well, Albo is for the people, and I want a job when I graduate, so he'll do something about it.
Yeah.
No one's doing anything about anything. It doesn't really matter. And things don't change just because a new political party has come in.
Yeah.
Like things don't really shift, and if they do, it's not quick.
Is the reason for that because this is where I go back to the incentives that a lot of the politicians are for the housing issue, they own investment properties.
100%.
You know, there's Michelle Ananda-Rajah, who's a Labor senator now, owns like 7 investment properties. So it's like she's going to personally struggle. Well, not struggle, but she's going to be affected if they cap rents and things like that. So this is where it's like the people that can actually have the decision, they have their finger in the pie. That's not the right metaphor. But
I did think that. I thought, they're just looking after their own pocket. I don't think that's necessarily the case. So both parties, and correct me if I'm wrong, they said, well, we're going to stop foreign investment in property for 2 years. Something.
Oh, that was just the Liberals,
Just the Liberals.
But the 2 years is where I had an issue. It's like, if you know it's an issue, why do you cap it?
Oh, Well, I have a feeling that Labor did something similar.
Okay. They probably
let's correct this if I'm wrong. But stop, like, that should have been done a long time ago. But at the same time, why aren't we having conversations around infrastructure? So if we have a look at like a lot of these areas close to the city where we could quite easily build, but everything is, my understanding, gets caught up in bureaucratic red tape. Whereas there are people that do want to develop land, like there are property developers that do want to open estates and this kind of thing. I'd love to have the opportunity to buy, but the issue is that the government isn't putting roads in these kinds of areas, or they're not kind of green stamping development to happen. And then when it doesn't happen fast enough. Because we do have a skills shortage in Australia. So how long did you have to wait to get a builder to do a last walkthrough before you could move into your house? Because I understand you bought off a plan.
It was 3 years.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no. Yeah, 3 years, almost 3 years.
Because we can't get a tradie to go out and to have a look and just give it the final tick. So you have to wait months after the house was built before you can actually get the keys and move in. That just blows my mind. This is like we're from a pretty developed country, and we're dealing with a real significant skills shortage. And one thing that really frustrates me when I went to school was, granted, I went to a private school and they're invested in having X amount of the graduates from this high school got into their preferred courses at university, because trade isn't seen as glamorous. And I don't like that. I think that we do need to encourage more young people to take up trades. I think that's really, really good. If you graduate with a marketing degree, you're not as employable as you are if you're a builder or you're an electrician or a plumber. And I think that these are conversations that need to be had. And I think that starts at those grassroots in those schools. There's absolutely nothing wrong with not pursuing tertiary education and pursuing a trade. In fact, you're going to be laughing in 5, 10, 15 years time.
And you can become a business owner through the trades as well.
Way faster.
And this is my kind of, I guess, political, I would say, movement yet. But like the idea that I'm coming up with is, like, I'm calling it like the everyday Aussies, is that we get, and I felt this too because I'm from, like, I didn't go to private school, I went to a public school. And it was never really direct, but there's that public-private divide where my school, I got a boost up, I got like a little bit of extra, it was called like CEAS or something, like I applied because I went to public school and not many people from my school went to uni. I got a spot. I didn't get it just because of that, but it helped me. It was like a thing where people at my area didn't really go to uni. But I think this is like, the political stuff and around identity politics too, which I think I've said many times is, I think it's a lot of that's just smoke and mirrors, and it's just a distraction from the economic stuff that we're actually talking about.
Yeah, of course it is.
I think, as you're saying, you're an everyday Aussie, I'm an everyday Aussie. You went to private school, I went to public school. That divide we need to start to move away from, like the tradie, the white collar versus blue collar. We're all getting screwed by the people at the top. So we need to, as you're saying, like some kind of disbanding together. We need to not be turning against each other, but recognizing the real enemy, or the people that are, like as you're saying, with like building the roads. This is a lot of that's by design. Like one party will come in and just cut
Yeah.
all the like we had the East-West link that got cut by Labor, and now they're building that. And if Liberals get in, they've said they'll stop doing that. So it's just this like they're dividing us up.
Well, for young families, Australia's not as fertile as what it once was. So I'll give an example about my father. I'll compare him to me because our generation is my understanding.
Can you have a right of reply?
Yeah, of course. Well, he'll agree with me. He'll agree with me. He won't know how to fix it, but he'll say that what you're saying is all factually right. My education level at 35 is higher than what his was.
Okay. Yeah.
Like he didn't have he had a first class honours degree in engineering. I have an MBA, and I graduated with distinction. And he'll tell you that like I'm no less intelligent, I'm no smarter. Like
those factors are not necessarily.
On paper, we're probably pretty comparable in terms of capacity. When he was around, perhaps just a little bit older than me, he was making $100,000. That was his base salary in 1999, and there was a bonus there too. We bought a house in Mount Eliza for, I think it was $240,000. So that was 2.5 times his base salary. On top of that, he had a lot of benefits that are just not available today. The company paid for the entire family's private health insurance, which was really good cover. He got a new car every 3 years. Services paid for, registration paid for by the government. I paid about $2,500 last month for my registration and my insurance for the year. And I paid for the cost of running the car myself. He had a BP card, never paid for petrol in 30 years. Never paid for private health insurance for the family. Got a nice bonus at the end of the year, and Australia experienced unprecedented growth year on year on year. So he got his bonus every time because his industry was in such high demand to support the population growth and the agriculture growth and the mining boom as well. So yes, he was in the right industry, but he was financially well compensated. On top of that, he put 2 kids through private school as well. I don't know anyone my age who will be looking at even being close to doing that in the next 5 years. I don't know, even those, my friends that went on to study traditionally high-paying jobs, they might have done medicine and become specialists, they're not quite in the same economic weight class that he was. Although they're doing okay. That kind of lifestyle, those dreams, those trappings are just not accessible. And I had this conversation with him, my dad, and he said, like, yeah, you're right, I don't know. And then there are some from his generation who'll say, oh, it's just because you want to live in Mount Eliza. It's like, maybe, but at the same time, it's like, what happened to that contract between, what does Gamo say? Have a go, you'll get a go. Like, there's a lot of people from our generation having a go and not getting a go. It's like, oh, well, maybe you have to compromise on where you want to live. I'm prepared to compromise. You tell me where I can afford a house and raise a family.
We did that.
Yeah, and how's that going?
I like it. I'm learning to love it. But you're right. Like, we're lucky because we actually have quite decent. There are issues, but like somewhere in the northern suburbs where it's like almost a 3-hour commute now because they'll have one roundabout exit for an estate of like 2,000 houses.
Exactly.
That irresponsible development.
That's another thing that I want to touch on as well. So I'm all for individual responsibility, but you have to be set up for that as well. I'll take responsibility for my education. I'll even pay for my HECS debt and my fee help and put myself in debt to further my education. But where is the job opportunity? It's usually closer to the city. And if we have a look at the amount of power that employers are wielding, why can someone not do, in my industry, do a day at home week? Like, why not? Well, I think everyone's got to be in the office. It's like that. I'm telling you now, people are no more productive in the office than if they had a day at home.
I think this is the most,
because I'll forget. I'm on a roll and I'll forget. So it's like, okay, I can, if I can do a day at home, I can pursue an economic opportunity that may be a little bit further out. Nathan, I spend 2 hours on the road every day going to and from work. That's at the end of the week, that's 10 hours because I don't have the option to work from home one of those days. I'm paying for petrol. If I did a day at home a week, I'm filling up a tank maybe 2 times less in a month.
Yeah.
That's significant. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. And look, I'm finding this to be the most effective argument against the right wingers. Is they say, oh, I'm for freedom and I'm for business, big and small. It's like the government, like even Peter Dutton was saying it. I don't know, it was just in the public service because that's what they can control, but ending work from home.
Yeah.
They walked it back.
Yeah.
But this is where it's like when you give corporations this power, or maybe it's not given, but when the government doesn't step in to like go, hang on a minute, just let businesses do whatever.
Yeah.
Individual workers, people like everyday Aussies lose control. You don't get freedom.
No, you don't.
If your boss is saying get back in the office or you lose your job,
yeah.
and it's like, okay, well you go somewhere else, but if all businesses are going to do that because there's no rules around it, how is that right-wing idea of freedom, how is letting corporations have all the power of freedom?
I'm
not saying you, but if you voted the Liberal Party.
Yeah, well, maybe I didn't. I think that there's got to be a conversation around, okay, if like first home buyers have to go far away from the city, there's got to be a conversation around making sure that they can still access opportunities for economic prosperity, and that's a job that will have some advancement and give them that upward mobility that they need. The chances are, particularly in my industry, that if I'm going to be in an economic weight class that enables me to buy a home and to raise a family and buy a house, they're not all going to be within proximity. If I don't have the opportunity to work remotely, say 2 days in the week, I don't know, the employer can pick the days that I do from home. It doesn't really make a difference to me.
Yeah, but having the choice.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it would help. But, it would certainly make a significant difference to my own personal bottom line at the end of the year to have some flexibility and freedom. And I don't buy that whole better together thing. I don't buy it. The team doesn't need to be together 5 days a week in the office. No,
that's just control.
It is. It's like, why is this better? And if there's someone in the company who's taken advantage of working from home, they've not done the right thing, then deal with them. But don't punish the rest of the workforce because one, maybe two people in a company chose to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. So how hopeful are you, to bring the conversation around, how hopeful are you that this stuff can change, or are you getting to the point of some of the, the non or donkey voters of like, that what we're limited in what we can do?
I would never donkey vote because I do recognise that we're very, very fortunate to live in a democracy of sorts, but certainly a lot more democratic than other countries, and that's not something that I want to give up. And I don't think that me doing a donkey vote makes a point or sends a message to anybody. I think that, and this is just my own personal belief, that I want my say to count. But I don't think that things are necessarily going to change. But I think that we are seeing some younger people that do get trapped in that feeling marginalised and disenfranchised, and because home ownership is such a dream for them, it is far beyond their reach. It's incredibly unlikely that they're going to be able to own a home because policies weren't put in place to protect home ownership and shelter as a right. It was turned into an investment, understandably, but unfortunately.
What about would you, like, my feeling of one of the ways out, I don't know if it's the only way or even a way that'll work, but where I am at the moment is more independent politicians that are detached from the big parties that don't have to do what they say.
That could help.
And say, like, and this is where I've broken away from the Greens because they were seen as obstructing.
Yeah.
You have a collection of sort of independents that say this is not right,
and
they're not going to ever be prime minister, but if they can have enough to have the balance of power and say we need to have these conversations and bring this to the public's attention. Because I think everything you've thought about it a lot and can articulate it.
Sure.
But I think a lot of like everyday Aussies, they feel it emotionally, but they can't quite. And that's where I think they go down the Trump and the Patriots or someone else, or they check out because they don't like what you're doing is they can't fully express in a logical, consistent manner what's actually going on.
Yeah.
If someone could and help them, that's my feeling is we could get more. I think we get a bigger coalition of voters to go, okay, if we had 5 more independents and like had 15 independents, that's 10% of
Yeah.
the lower house to get bills passed,
Yeah.
and we say we're not passing anything, or we'll cooperate with you, but we have to start moving this in the right direction. I think politically that's the best way forward at the moment. I don't trust the Labour Party to do it.
I like the idea. I think it would be just very, very difficult to get it over the line and get Australians to be aligned, because there's just as many Australians that don't want that. Like we talk about this tax on super.
Yeah.
Nathan, what's the population of Australia?
26.7 or so, yeah.
Let's say it's even 20. Let's say give it a lower number, 26. We'll fact check that.
We're about to run out. I think we're about to run out of time.
I was surprised to hear that this tax on Australians with over 3 million in a super only impacts 80,000 Australians.
Yeah.
I was surprised how low that number was.
Yeah.
Why are we even having this conversation?
But this is the right wing, and I've done my video on this one already. Like the right wing media machine is just going to make it any Australian super feel like it's going to affect them, and that's just lies. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is we do. I'm not saying that, you know, that independent thing I said, I'm not saying that that's going to be easy. Yeah. But I'm saying I think that will help, because this right-wing media machine of just the blatant lies, conflating those 80,000 super wealthy Australians that can afford to pay a bit more with everyday Aussies who have earned their super.
That's right. I think that it would be difficult. It would take generations, because I do think that, and I'm not a boomer basher. Yeah. I think that, you know, one of the arguments that I have is, you know, if I have a look at some of the boomers that I know that get extremely cheap public transport, like it's like half the price. You know, nobody deserves it less. You know, like as for some of the ones that I know. But it's not means tested. I think that a lot more needs to be means tested. Than is currently. You know, if it was means tested, I'd be entitled to it. You know, but the reality is that it's for retirees. But a lot of boomers do see the tax that they've paid as a pension scheme, and it's not. It's tax, and I think that they are, you know, like they want to protect their wealth, understandably, but in doing so, there is less opportunity for younger generations. And if we have a look at, like, I'm 35. I just had my first child. I would love to have had a child earlier. And I'm not alone in that. There's others, families as well. But it's becoming increasingly less viable to have 2 or 3 kids. I would have loved to have had that. How many I will have, I don't know. But I'm loving being a father so far. And I think that it's incredibly sad that there are couples that will miss out on that opportunity for purely fiscal reasons. Because the government hasn't stepped in to, and it's not coming in to balance everything and say, right, you've had your turn, it's this person's turn. It's just to enforce policies that do kind of mitigate everything becoming a zero-sum game. Yeah,
like if you've done well, it's your duty or moral responsibility to pay back into the system.
You would think so.
To bring the floor up. That's the whole thing. It's not about punishing people that have done well, but it's recognising as part of a society, you know, you've used public tools to get that self-made idea is a bit of a myth. Like you use the public utilities to be successful and give everyone else that chance, so people, when they lose their job, for example, don't become homeless and they get caught. It's, you know.
I think that we're coming close to the end. So, but I think that it'd be good to kind of set ourselves up for further conversations around things like employment and the job market. We can talk about our own experiences around there, because I know that there's a lot of. And I'll quote the source on this statistic in the next one, but I believe that 30% of kind of higher educated Australians are underemployed based on the investment that they've made in their education.
The underemployment is massive.
I fall into that category. But the opportunities just aren't there. But we do have an ageing workforce that is working longer, and sometimes they need to. And then if you do get older Generation X and boomers that otherwise would retire, they have like kids to pay for, well, of course they're going to stay in those jobs, but then those jobs don't become vacant for the next generation to step into.
We've got big problems, to say the least. And this has been a good introduction to the audience, to you and your ideas. So so I can't work out from that conversation who you voted for. But it's a mystery. You can have a guess. Well, you're going to tell us, or no? You keep that a mystery for now.
It wasn't Liberal.
What if you were the one deciding vote?
Well, I wasn't, because I saw the numbers.
This has been The Rightest Leftist. I'm Nathan Ogilvie. Thank you for coming on, Joe.
Thank you.
And we will have another episode again very soon, I think, and we'll keep chatting, because as you said, like each topic we just mentioned there would probably be its own an episode. So let's do it.
That sounds good.